So Diane, we're ready to start recording.
Okay, I've already turned it on.
Thank you. So since we're recording, I'll just do a little bit of thank you for joining us for the May 28, 2019 Local Agency WIC Nutritionist Continuing Education segment of our meeting. For the next hour and 10 minutes, we'll be having a courageous conversation on how a focus with weight impacts nutrition counseling. This conversation will be facilitated by myself, Cheryl Alto, Meghan Robinson, a dietitian from Jackson County, WIC, input from Bernita Reyna and Julie Reeder, and all of you on the phone and in the room. The session will be recorded, and we will have an opportunity for polling. We'll be pausing for input, and we invite you to type in questions and comments as well. I've been a dietitian at the state level for 11 years, and this is a conversation that's been a long time coming and one that is near and dear to my heart. And I really appreciate Meghan starting the conversation. We're hoping that we can take it into a deeper conversation that started in November 2018. And our hope is to create a safe, supportive space where we can address a very complex and at times confusing topic of weight, growth, health, drivers of motivation, acceptance and compassion, both for ourselves and for the participants we work with. We'll want to explore how the data we obtain in WIC informs and drives our counseling, and identify ways that we can construct phrases that build trust amongst ourselves and with our participants, and how we can bring this information into our workplace.
Okay, so this is Meghan, and I'm super happy that everyone wants to continue this conversation as well, but I just wanted to give some kudos to Cheryl. She put together this entire presentation and then came to me and asked to help facilitate some of it, so she definitely did all of the hard work. This conversation does continue on my November presentation, Body Trust and Alternative Approach, and we're just wanting to continue having this conversation, making you guys feel more comfortable talking about weight or what some perceived weight issues are with our clients. But I did want to just refresh some of the key takeaways from my presentation, and that was that a weight-inclusive approach adheres to the health professional's ethical principle to first do no harm, that there is stronger evidence to suggest that factors or behaviors contribute to poor health outcomes rather than weight alone, that greater internal awareness and body appreciation are associated with higher adherence to eating based on physiological hunger and satiety cues rather than emotional and external cues, and that people are more likely to take care of their bodies if they appreciate and have positive feelings toward their bodies. Studies have shown people in larger bodies do not participate as frequently in doctor visits as those in weight normative bodies. So that's just sort of a refresher of what I talked about in November. Can you go to the next slide? And also, this table, I don't know if you guys remember this, it is adapted from the Health at Every Size movement, and it is a refresher from what I had talked about. It goes over the differences between the traditional diet paradigm and non-diet thinking. As a reminder, the traditional diet paradigm believes that obesity is a disease and believes there is a correlation between being overweight and medical risk for children and teens, such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, orthopedic complications, new onset asthma, sleep apnea, and shortened life expectancy. And the diet paradigm also believes that the cure for obesity is weight loss. They believe in control, restriction. They say things like fat is bad. And they get there by using scare tactics, like if you don't lose weight soon, you will die. You won't be around to be a grandparent, yada, yada. They use slogans like eat less, exercise more, calories in, calories out. They use a lot of guilt. You don't care about your health, that's fine for you, but you need to do something for your child. Whereas the non-diet or the health at every size movement says that we trust that each person is responsible for taking care of his or her own body, that good health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being, not just weight alone. Believes a healthy lifestyle can improve health risks regardless of what you weigh. Next slide.
So we wanted to have a moment just to have some reflections that 6 months later, what are your thoughts? And as we go through, wanting to know what conversations you've had, what's been helpful and what's been challenging. So this is kind of just to get our heads back into the discussion that we had. If there's any initial thoughts, feel free to speak now, or we'll kind of pick it up as we go along because it'll be very interactive. Now, the last conversation was right after Thanksgiving, so it came up right before the holidays. And I do want to applaud an online conversation that happened between Greg and Meghan in the interim, just kind of doing some peer-to-peer conversations. So that is probably one of the coolest things that can happen, is just kind of like reaching out and like, what would you do in this situation?
I guess some challenges I've had is, actually Greg and I were talking about it on the way over here. It just seems like people and individuals in the health community or health professionals are just kind of divided over this whole thing. And I have parents coming in and over their child in a certain way, and we talk about how they feel the child is eating, and then they feel a lot better, and then they still say that, you know, the doctor's telling them one thing, this provider's telling them another thing, and I think it's unprofessional to be like contradictory as well. It's hard to strike a balance. It's a challenge.
Yeah. So I just, if I may paraphrase, that was Michelle from Salud just saying that it is challenging. There's mixed messages. We're hearing a lot from the medical community. And Julie and I were just talking today, and we'll see some too, is that we hear, what was the message that came up on text messing?
Oh yeah, so as a journal editor, I make decisions on about 200 articles a year, and just today and just last week, I sent Cheryl one title that came in, and it's like combating childhood obesity by texting parents. And I will tell you that so many of the articles that I get all start off with the childhood obesity epidemic, even if there isn't anything like an intervention that would impact that. That is really what drives so much of the academic literature and the funding right now, that I completely get that.
Yeah, it is. And you don't want to have mixed messages going on. So that's one in terms of if you're hearing it from the healthcare provider, how do we have that conversation that doesn't make us look foolish or unprofessional, and that we are supportive of the individual. So I think that's a very valid, very valid point.
I have found in some cases where you have the family, the primary care provider, and then WIC, and there's a supplement involved where WIC saying, well, it is or is not appropriate, the provider saying the opposite, and the parents caught in the middle, and that can be really challenging, whether you're talking about underweight, overweight, or somewhere in between.
Right.
It happens in all those cases.
Yep. Yeah, that concern about getting enough to eat, or that appetite, and how the role of the supplement is a very, as we have kind of evolved, it's more building relationship. It's a Band-Aid of sorts to look at that. So we thought it might be helpful as we go through to do a polling question. So this is your opportunity of just exploring, no identifiers on this one, is looking at the diet versus the non-diet paradigm continuum. The first question being, what number reflects where you are right now? If you were to have to force a choice between, on the lower end, the 0 end being aim for a certain weight, that underweight or overweight is a health risk, And then the continuing going up to 10, where body will seek its own weight and focus on health behaviors. If you were to plug in, and this could be done on the phone, or you could just be doing it in your head. This is not something that necessarily we need to share. But there is a phone number that you can use your phone to text in. So that is 541-682. Let's see, 4202.
Yeah, I have, if you exit out of there and
Okay.
open the same thing.
Wow. So if you're with us online and you can see the pollev.com, you can join via that link. Or if you're sitting in the room and you have your phone out, or if you're sitting in your room and have your phone out, you can text to 22333 to join the poll and then select your answer for the next piece. I know we're still getting used to this
Oh,
texting.
sorry, I said the wrong phone number. My
Yeah.
apologies.
Don't
So-
call Cheryl's phone number. We'll get you
Oh,
nowhere.
that's not my phone number. Okay. So it's text Julie Reader 276. Type that into the number 22333. And so it's,
To join the poll.
Yep, to join the poll, and then you need to put sort of A, B, D, C, D. I tried to fix it so it was with the numbers, but you can see like A is I'm at 1 and so.
just a lot of critical thinking that has to go.
There's a lot, I know. There we go. Next time we'll make everybody do videos on TikTok and post them. No,
I
Julie.
vaguely know what that is. Enough to be dangerous. So if I'm interpreting this right, Julie, that we, C would be more at the,
Yep, so
So-
one, you can see this A is 1 there, so you can see that about 10% or so are at a 3 or so on the scale. So 1 is a little bit more towards, you need to get a certain weight, and 10 is that I'm more on the body will seek its own weight. So we've got a pretty good distribution, actually.
still have some coming in. Okay, so we've got a good distribution, and that's, for the conversation, I think it's really helpful to have both sides of the conversation and continuum there. Okay, to exit out. So the next one that you have,
Yeah, she'll just click to the next.
okay, that'd be great. So I'll keep this up, and then,
With the Skype meeting.
oh, Skype meeting, okay. Oops.
And the next question, and you're already in the poll, is where would you like to be on that scale?
So one is like, where are you right now, and then what, the next one would
Hopefully you
be,
don't need to read
where-
this one.
where would be your intent, or where would you like to? Okay. So, any comments on that one? That motivation. It's fascinating watching that fluctuate. Great, thank you for participating on that, and this wanting to identify.
well, at least most people are wanting to move in the direction.
This is really hard work. Oh, okay. Right here.
Sorry. This is Diane.
Oh, it's my end, Diane.
Okay, no problem.
You're doing great. This is what Meghan was experiencing before. So hopefully everyone on the phone is seeing a title that this is hard work, because it is. That it is perfectly normal. It's perfectly okay to experience a level of discomfort no matter where you are on the continuum. And because we all come to this work from a different place, we might have our own personal experience through family, friends, individuals, people that we've worked with, our own experiences around weight, food, body image, and messages of how we are supposed to look, what we are supposed to weigh, or how we're supposed to feel. And that the issue of obesity is complex, it's multifactorial, that if we had one diet that would fit this, even though there's, I mean, it's, what is it, like $1 billion industry now, that this would be something that would be evidence-based and taken care of. But just like Michelle was saying, that there is a very strong prevailing belief in healthcare that we have to do something, that no matter the harm, the existing harm is too great. And on the flip side, we also have emerging science on microbiome and many other factors of what influence our body size. So it's one where that we are bombarded almost like in warlike terms as we need to either fight, combat, act on this public health issue of obesity. And that we heard from Meghan that looking at diets that's oftentimes that can do more harm, and that for some individuals they work really well, so it's meeting the individual where they're at, but for others it's perpetuating some pain and shame, and just that being accepting of all body sizes is where the healing can happen. So I pulled some work from Sandra Friedman, who's done some work in health at every size, and she presented on this at one session that if I'm really honest about health at every size, that I'm afraid that if we tell people they can be healthy at every size, that they might eat and eat until they explode, that they will have no incentive to lose weight and be healthy. That maybe we feel that we'd be irresponsible to the children that we work with. And it may be that it just feels that it's not fair. Why can she be fat and healthy while I continuously watch what I eat and exercise every day to keep my weight down? Sometimes health at every size may feel like we're throwing up our arms and saying, do nothing. And that is not where we're headed. Health at every size may have us feel angry, jealous, or just bring up many different feelings. And one initiative that I came across up in from Canada that I wanted to share and set the stage a little bit is giving voice in stories to individuals who have lived with weight all their life, just to be able to share what it's like from their experience. So this is a true story from Leslie, and I'll just share a short part of it. I shared the link there that there are many other ones that they have a blog going on in Obesity Canada. So Leslie is a 36-year-old married mother of two living in Ontario, Canada. She grew up in a small rural town, married her high school sweetheart during university, left school so that he could pursue his career, and they've been raising their two children with autism for the last 12 years. When asked, how do you perceive your body? She replied, this is a really loaded question for me. I have days where I hate my body. I hate that it doesn't move the way I want it to, that it wiggles and jiggles in ways that others find upsetting or gross. I hate that I worry about sitting on furniture because I wonder if I will fit, or worse, will I break it? I hate shopping for anything, clothes especially, but even for groceries, because people judge you based on what's in your cart. Then there are days where I love my body, and these are really few and far between. I love that it carried my babies, and that underneath all that fat, I am strong. And I have to be in order to carry the weight. I love it that it contains a kind person who is giving and loves strongly. But like I said, these days are very rare. More often than not, I feel ugly and ashamed of how I look. I've always been the fat child in my home. My mother was larger in her youth, and it directly impacted the way weight was handled in our home. I would hear stories of how she would make a snack out of a whole box of Katie, which is cereal in Canada, Katie, when she got home from school, or how her mother would put her on this diet or that diet, and how this one worked better than that one. I was encouraged to join a weight loss group, and I was taken to dietitians. I won a provincial title for weight loss when I was about 12 years old for losing 110 pounds. I remember my mom weighing me, and I wanted to try to trick the scale so she would think that I had lost a pound, and how excited she would be for me. I also remember going back to school shopping and not being able to find anything but stretch pants, and how disappointed she was with me. She would watch my plate to see how much food I put on it and how much I ate, and she still does to this day. My self-image was tied directly to the number on the scale. If I went up, I was guilt-tripped and the diet was revised. If I went down, I was celebrated. Health wasn't really discussed in terms of my weight or body size. I was mostly tied to fear. If you get much bigger, you're going to have a heart attack, or your father and I are worried about your health. I just don't want you to die young. I learned to equate my weight with my health. The bigger I got, the faster I was going to die. Every twinge, every ache, I equated to imminent death. So what was her message that she wanted to get out to Obesity Canada is if we could get doctors to stop treating patients living with obesity as a burden and lessen that stigma that is attached to the diagnoses, then perhaps society will follow. It's not a change that will happen overnight, but it's definitely a change that has been needed for a long time. I've been trying to be more body positive for the past year, and I keep hearing the same thing. You can't be fat and healthy. Actually, you can. I don't have diabetes. I don't have high blood pressure, unless I'm stressed out like an average sized person, and I have extra stressors in my life that impact me on a daily basis. And I can do many of the same things that others can do. Does my weight limit me? Absolutely. But should it define my health or who I am? Absolutely not. I encourage you to go on. There's parts of her story that she talks about having a C-section and how during that process they had complications, and how they would call in technicians to lift up part of her body and just treat it like it wasn't her body, to try and to try to get the procedure done, and just how dehumanizing it felt for her. So it is an interesting story to continue on. So one of the sessions that Sue Shi and Laura Spalding attended at the National WIC Association meeting was on an initiative that the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, or CNMI WIC, is their undertaking. And they had WIC staff attend a 6-session training, including an assessment of implicit bias, a test that was offered by Harvard, and I have included at the end of this presentation. I took it, and I showed that I have some implicit bias to thinness, So it was very interesting, just in terms of taking the part of it, and just to acknowledge that we all have our biases, our stories, or what we bring into it. And I was kind of surprised, like, what? Like, I mean, that you think that you work in this and you do this, but these are deep. These are deep beliefs. These are what we have been told for a long time. This is where our comfort level is. And it's okay to just acknowledge that we're each at a different spot of how we're comfortable with either working with individuals of different sizes, what assumptions that we might make based on a person's character, whether Meghan alluded to it a little bit in terms of that part of, if you're fat, you might be lazy, sloppy, just no motivation. So then asking ourselves, what assumptions do we make regarding a person's character, intelligence, abilities, health status, or behaviors based only on their weight? And what are some of the common stereotypes that come to mind when you think about weight? And when you have those counseling sessions with your patients or your participants, how do they feel when they leave your office? Do they want to come back? Do you want them to come back? We've all had sessions where kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's done. And that could be of any size. Some of the ones that are really challenging are the failure-defined failure to thrive, or the low birth weight. So while it feels like the story I shared was on a high body weight, it could be weight anywhere on that continuum in terms of where we feel comfortable. Just being aware of what activates me during a counseling session, what gets me going. Like, how many times have we covered this? How is it that you're still providing pop or potato chips or whatever it is that part that just kind of gets you going? So how do you feel in your body as you're going through those counseling sessions? And next one's a really big one. How can I fully trust my patient with his or her own body? Sometimes if we have a hard time trusting our own selves with our own bodies, that can be a challenge of being able to convey that to others. One of the comments from someone who took the training at the CNMI said, I see now how I might be biased because I want a certain weight for myself. I might not feel like I want that certain weight for my client, but I want that certain weight for myself. So this in turn may have an impact of how I counsel, that I might want that goal for others too. But I just haven't really acknowledged that. And I think it's hard that we really want to assure ourselves that we are upholding our professional responsibilities, and we must talk about weight management. So weight management means to control. Gaining weight, losing weight, and to shift that lens so that we have what will we have the greatest impact on the participants' overall health? That the short-term weight loss or gain might be where the focus is, and that growth chart is just right there in front of us. It's like the first screen that we come to. So it's just, you trip over it every time. That are we looking at that weight loss or weight gain, or are we looking at the eating habits that can support the best possible health for that individual? So no matter the size, what are the health behaviors? What are the health discussions? What is happening in their life that is making decisions for them for lifelong?
And just to kind of echo what who made the comment about the things we want for our clients, but yet still dieting, there was something that I learned when doing the body trust, and that was you can't go further with clients than you have gone yourself. meaning you can't necessarily promote health at every size or that framework while actively participating in diet culture. And also worth revisiting is how weight bias and discrimination is a public health and human rights problem. That weight stigma can show up in all areas of life. It's really hard to ignore. Also, weight bias is seen as socially acceptable. But how and where these things show up is worth noting. All of this can happen in our workplaces, the media, on the playground, with our friends, with our families, and it can show up in the form of jokes, teasing, bullying, physical abuse, and discrimination. Some studies have shown that elementary school kids with defined obesity face a 63% higher chance of being bullied. 54% of adults labeled obese report being stigmatized by their coworkers. 64% of those adults report experiencing weight bias from a healthcare professional. And one of the things I really wanted to bring up was how 72% of images and 77% of videos stigmatize persons in larger bodies. So what they usually do is they take pictures of them, but what they do is you'll notice on pictures of fat people, they have the head cut off so that you don't see who this person is. And usually they're shown like carrying a snack of some sort, like popcorn or a soda. And what this is really doing is dehumanizing the individual. Weight stigma also shows up in how we talk about food. Many clients have reported they felt that they were living in a food police state run by the food mafia in their home, work, and in clinics. So, for example, we could say, "You're not going to eat that high-fat food, are you?" Foods are also often described in moralistic terms: tempting, sinful, decadent, cheating. Also in how we describe children, like, "Oh, aren't you a big boy?" Or "You're such a cute little thing." And sometimes they're comments that might slip or that we might make just based off of our own biases. Like, "Look what she has done to herself. If only she had some self-control or wasn't so lazy." Or maybe if she would just get off the couch and exercise, she wouldn't look like that. But there is harm in these statements. And some consequences of weight bias can include increased vulnerability for depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and poor body image. Weight stigma is a stressor that increases risk of disordered eating behaviors, binge eating, unhealthy weight control practices, yo-yo dieting, coping with stigma by eating more food. Stress, in turn, increases cortisol, and then the cycle can continue. And next slide. A recent article came out that talked about how weight bias in medicine can lead to misdiagnoses and physical and mental pain. And the common theme or the takeaway was women with higher BMIs are delaying counseling or not getting preventative health care more often than women in smaller bodies. And I actually think this can be true at both ends of the weight spectrum. Next slide. And that with that said, I have a little case study on that. So recently I saw a woman for FD appointment. This was her third pregnancy, although it was not like any other of her pregnancies. She'd actually been experiencing weight loss, whereas before she was considered in the normal range for her weight gain. She mentioned that she had a lack of appetite and that she had recently stopped breastfeeding her toddler. She gained, like I said, normal weight gain with her previous pregnancies, but with this current one, she had lost 15 pounds. So she was scheduled with me to explore this. We had talked about stopping breastfeeding. I had asked her the typical questions about her appetite, her meal times, normal routines, all of that. She said she did not have a strong craving or desire for specific foods, which, can happen during pregnancy, but this was the first time this had happened to her. When I asked her interest in meals, like are there certain foods or even cooking foods or anything like that, she said she had no interest and that she had not really left the house recently. And then I asked her directly if she felt she was experiencing depression. And she said, I think so. She had said that she thought maybe it was related to stopping breastfeeding, but that has been a few months. And I just wanted to bring this up because sometimes it's not about the weight, and we want it so badly to be, or we have been groomed or taught that what we should focus on. And I will say that the dietitian in me really wanted to focus on her weight loss and how to make sure she's getting calories, but it's the WIC certifier in me and everything that I have learned with participant centered and renew that really wanted to probe more and explore the root cause for why she was actually losing weight. And I think it's just good to note that sometimes those things get missed by us, by physicians, by OB, or any healthcare professional because we're focused so much on what someone should weigh when they're actually experiencing something else entirely, and the weight loss was just a cause of that.
So I really enjoyed working with Meghan with having the personal one-to-one expertise that she has. And it got to me thinking about, okay, what have we done at the state to look at weight bias? Because we talk about, promoting health and promoting all of this, but I hadn't thought about it and look at even the terms. I mean, I designed this slide and I put in combat. I mean, I'm still learning about my own biases on this, so it caught me off guard on that one. But what the conversation, sometimes we feel in WIC that we do go to combat with other sections of public health on this issue. And I think this slide brought me to attend where they were well intended in Georgia of being able to shine the light on obesity. This was a public health campaign that they did back in 2012. And the first one, as a young boy, saying, warning, big bones didn't make me this way, big meals did. Next one is fat kids become fat adults. Chubby kids may not outlive their parents. He has his father's eyes, his laugh, and maybe even his diabetes. That sometimes our efforts to be able to shine the light, because the campaign, they came out and said, we wanted to stop childhood obesity in Georgia, formed an organization called Strong for Life, number 4 in there, as an effort to stop sugarcoating the problem. Some proponents of the campaign said it's very provocative and it makes people uncomfortable, but when people are uncomfortable, that change comes. And it helps me see that there's both sides to this, because there are some campaigns here in the building of we need to tax sugar-sweetened beverages. We need to combat obesity. And that really their focus was to bring together that they wanted to train pediatricians, which they did. They trained 600. But the negative messages around food, of body image, and contributing to the underlying fear of food or dietary fat or weight gain, how this can actually set the stage for distorted eating and eating problems, that we can cause more harm. What came out of it is a counter public health campaign from a woman by the name of Marilyn Wan, who's the author of Fatio. I don't know if I have that right, if anyone's familiar with that. She designed a campaign that went viral, and it says, I stand. I stand for healthy children of all sizes. Fat shaming is bad for health. I stand against harming fat children, hate and health. So this had a positive kind of dialogue going. And I checked in this past week of where this campaign was, and this is their website, which I thought was kind of interesting that the headline was, Why Your Child's Emotional Wellness Matters. But it shows that they have changed their ways in terms of how they're talking about it. They're going around more behaviors. And I actually found some really fascinating videos on this website, and they talk about responsive feeding, they talk about developmental milestones. So they've done this whole shift, and part of it was getting the dialogue started. So that's what we're hoping, is just getting the dialogue started and just seeing that there might be a lot of different ways to approach this, and where do we land on it, and just to kind of have information. So what have we done within WIC? And I applaud Oregon in terms of WIC, and that just the grant that we did for changing the clinical environment to make it more trauma informed, it allowed for better seating. It allowed for sizes of all sizes in the environment. We take pictures of beautiful families of all sizes, of all colors, and that they want to highlight the two up at the above on the photos that they have up there. That's from the Red Center, of just showing people with healthy behaviors of all sizes, so that we reflect the diversity that we see amongst ourselves and in the clinic. So I think Oregon WIC has done a lot, and we have added, and we did this quietly and we did not really share it with everybody, but when Becky Seal gets a request for data, because we do have some of the best data in the state, or most requested data, maybe I should say, regarding obesity data or overweight data for WIC children ages 2 to 4, we have added a statement on there that says the Oregon WIC program acknowledges that children can be healthy and meet the criteria for overweight or obesity. We work with families to promote responsive feeding, eating competence, and health at every size, as it is a means to support steady growth of the child and to minimize weight-based stigma. So I just wanted to call that out, that gets sent out.
And just to touch on growth versus health, and how growth doesn't necessarily equate to the health of a person, and growth charts in general. So growth charts are not a union of the paths actually taken by individuals. Instead, they summarize data on someone's sizes at targeted ages. It is entirely normal for individual children to grow at variable rates, which results in them being relatively shorter, taller, heavier, or lighter than their peers, irregularly across all ages. So, for example, a relatively short 4-year-old may become a relatively tall 5-year-old, and this biological growth trajectory may take him from a size at the 35th percentile among 4-year-olds to the 60th percentile among 5-year-olds a year later. Next slide. And again, BMI does not equal automatic health. As a reminder, BMI became widespread due to the difficulty in obtaining accurate measurements of body fat in non-clinical settings. It was designed by a statistician in the late 1800s to just measure a group of white able-bodied men. So it does not take into account gender, race, age, or ethnicity. It is not a good predictor of total body fat. It does not distinguish between fat and muscle tissues or their measure of excess weight rather than excess body fat. And populations differ in the level of risk as fat distributed differently in different populations. This is where people started talking about abdominal obesity or central obesity or abdominal fat, and it could be clear in some populations. So, for example, some Asian populations tend to have relatively low BMIs, but they can have higher levels of abdominal fat, and this makes them, or has shown to make them, more prone to non-insulin dependent diabetes, hypertension, and coronary artery disease. There is evidence against the validity of BMI as a health indicator, and is most damaging in respect to cardiovascular disease. But with all that said, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission recently proposed rules which allow employers to penalize an employee up to 30% of the cost of their health insurance if they fail to meet specific health criteria, including reaching a specified BMI once again reinforcing the assumption that higher BMI individuals uniformly face poor health. This study also found that approximately 29% of those individuals labeled obese were cardiometabolically healthy. Next slide.
Bernita.
Oh, this is my opportunity to just acknowledge that sometimes what we see on the medical data screen versus the growth graph doesn't look to be telling us the same story. And I wanted to just recognize that I've had conversations with our programmers to try to figure out why that is, and just wanted to share a couple of notes. First of all, on the medical data screen, the measurements and age are used to calculate percentiles. The percentiles cannot be displayed when they're over 99% or under 0%. You won't see 112% and you won't see any negative percentiles. When they use the age, it's calculated to the day. And this data, these calculations are the ones that we use for risk assignment. All of the functionality that is behind the scenes on the medical data screen is completely separate and different from the growth graphs. The only thing that they have in common is that the growth graph button is on the medical data screen. The growth graphs have their own set of functionality. They use CDC data points to build graphs, and there is some extrapolation that's used to connect those data points on the graphs because there aren't enough points to make a solid line. The measurements are plotted based on age, not on percentiles. The age is rounded up or down to the nearest week, so that the illustration that you'll see on the growth graph could look different than what you might see on a medical data screen. And this could be quite apparent, especially on times when the participant is in the process of changing from infant to child, or from 3 to older, or from 1 to 2. Sometimes that is those transition points are even more apparent when you're comparing the medical data screen to the growth graphs. So I just wanted to acknowledge that although these are still valid tools to review, they may not be things that you would that will always make perfect sense. And just to give you just that little bit of background, so that you know that they are two different sets of functionality, and that percentiles are not being calculated with the graphing. They're going by measurements and age, and the age is calculated different than what you would see on the medical data screen, which is indeed focused on percentiles. Ta-da!
So thinking what we know about someone who's coming in to WIC and talking about growth, we have the amazing potential in WIC to empower, to instill, to say, you've got this. You are the best person who knows your own body, who is in charge of your family. And how do we help support that conversation, to support that we believe in them when we use the growth charts? That how we interpret those growth charts or how we use them can really help us support understanding what we're hearing about the behaviors, or it can start to build in concern, fear, or anxieties around growth. And we know that with babies, that is one thing that they do get done a lot. They get done at birth. They get done at the follow-up visits. It's one that just seems to be a constant, and it sometimes gets a higher priority than hearing about How do you know when your baby's hungry? How do you know when your baby's full? What are the cues that you're picking up? What do you get the sense of that's happening with your baby? So if we're focused on weight management, that has a very different conversation versus if we're talking about, okay, your child's approaching like 2 years of age. We know that appetite's going to start to decrease, and we know that there's going to be more of hearing about picky eating at that time. So if we're so focused on weight, how does that change the conversation versus this is normal, you've got this. This is what to expect in the next 6 months or whatever time that I'll see you. And let's check in on how those behaviors are happening with your families. And what Emma was saying is, what guidance do we want to provide our staff? What do we have in place so that if there is concern, if there is doubt that there's a little bit of dip in that growth velocity, what is the role? How do we have that conversation of issuing Pediasure or something like that? To kind of like, oh, okay, let me give you a med doc, or let me issue that, have a conversation. Because that, and as we did as a group study, looking at all the case studies within the Pediatric Learning Collaborative, we saw that there were times where mom said, this is fine, it's my third child, this is normal. And the staff still said, well, we'll go ahead and just give you the med doc and you can have that conversation with the doctor. So then they planted that seed of doubt and they come back around and we've got them, now we're looking at weaning on that Pediasure. So it's how do we have that support of discussion, having growth charts support what we're doing a clinical assessment on rather than driving that conversation of a clinical assessment. And I think we were going to do a polling question, but I think for the sake of time, we'll jump out. And so in the room and then on the phone, what I would like to do in the room is just, how do you feel, what message do you get from the state office? Like, if you don't show those growth charts, do you feel like if you were being observed that you didn't do a full assessment? So just kind of want to do a thumbs up or thumbs down or media of the road, like, do you feel, or do you think your staff feels that those growth charts are part of a true full assessment and need to be shared with families? If you think that they need to be shared with families, let's do a thumbs up. If you think that they don't need to be shared, thumbs down. So
It depends.
Or it depends. Yeah, it depends. And because it depends. Okay. So on the phone, it would be, if you feel like they need to be shared, 1 would be yes, they have to be shared. 2, depends. 3, no, they don't need to be shared as part of a true full assessment. So in the room, show thumbs. Thumb down.
We have a comment. I don't feel as it is expected. We only use them when needed to share, to reassure, or to show what I'm thinking.
To reinforce and to share.
Reinforce.
Okay.
And then we also got a 3.
Okay. That's reassuring, because I think sometimes when we go out and do observations, we hear like, well, we thought we had to show that to the families. We thought, and so that would be a good conversation to have with our staff is, do we need to turn that screen around and just explain that growth charts, which sometimes, I mean, I don't know, I've had hard times explaining some of these growth charts to families. So I don't know what that means. Let's have a conversation. Let's find out what's happening in the family, that's happening in the food environment. So part of that, we wanted to look at some of those growth charts, which can be very confusing. So we have a girls chart, and you see that one plot we have down at the 10th, then it slips to the 5th, it jumps up to the 50th, and then going up between what would that be, 90th and 95th, you think? Yep. So what do you think's going on here? What would you want to explore more?
The height.
You want to look at the height, okay? Okay, so keep going. What else would you like to look at?
Is this before or after we've had a conversation?
Before, where are we in terms of the intervention, okay? So on K, So early history, 4-week preemie. Was doing some breastfeeding, some formula, low to medium risk, homemade baby food, continued breastfeeding past a year. Mom was focused on the types of fluid and water going in. Dad wanted to know more about portion control and that the child wants to eat all day. You asked about on little K what her height was. Height also corrected and was following a very similar trajectory, landing above the 98. So growth chart weight for age continued to go up slightly more than the height. So this is one where we started off as a preemie, and based on, like Michelle said, we want to have a conversation, find out what happened during that period of time. And is this what we're just seeing normal correction going on, or is there something else additional happening? So knowing that that the plot is one piece of the puzzle, one piece of the conversation. So here's another one. This is a male's chart, and we're consistently above the 95th. Concerned, not concerned?
Rate of gain is fairly steady, it's not. So without knowing anything, my assumption would be that this is the body.
Other thoughts? Let's see if I got other charts for you to look at. So,
We got two questions.
Oh,
Or
thank you.
We got two things. One was how tall and how old, and then the other comment was depends on diet and activity factors.
okay, so how tall? We've got the, you can see the length there. So length is also, has a higher trajectory. And that there was a change that, what was the second question?
How tall, how old, and then the second comment was depends on diet and activity factors.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is I want to invite you that it's beyond the diet and nutrition factors, what is happening in the home. So the situation for this little one is grandparents gained custody. Mom was in treatment and suffering from depression. There's limited financial support, and grandfather also has health issues. Grandma's tired. Grandma's tired. It says the child has too much energy and a huge appetite, and looking forward to sending the child to Head Start as she needs a break during the day. So looking at the whole child, the whole family, because if we focus just on the activity and that part of it, but this may be a new curve that is happening for this little one based on where they're at living in the circumstances with grandma. Would we be okay with that?
Hello, Cheryl. This is Christine in Josephine County. Can you hear me? I had a comment back to what you were saying, and we've I was talking with some other coordinators, and we were wondering how to, I think it was Lynetta, where you mentioned how do we incorporate those A, B, C, D, E's from the new certifier guide, and I feel like in the notes section, by just putting in A, B, C, D, E in the notes section and adding in that E piece of the environment, it's kind of prompting these conversations as well, for me at least, with the clients.
Thank you, Christine. That's helpful that you have that other piece of what might be going on for the family that might be influencing a new growth channel. Yep. And if we focus Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to jump to the next one. I thought I had BMI on this one too. I don't. So having that full assessment, including the environment, I think is really helpful. So if we focus on controlling portions or activity, that's kind of the weight management side of it. If we're looking at, Grandma, what happens when you get tired? What does that look like? And how do the meals feel in your house versus how was it going with when he was living with mom? So exploring kind of the environment, and when your husband's having a bad day, how does that look like in terms of just being able to get something on the table? So let's go. Oh no, gosh, we're running out of time. So here is one growth channel, that one on the lower end, following their own curve. This particular story was interesting in that there was health issues that impacted the kidneys. Height was also low and kind of jagged. So you can see we probably have a misjudgment, where we probably needed to re-measure at that early part where we have a big drop in height. The birth weight on this particular one was normal, and yet they went on high calorie formula, the preemie formula, the 22 calorie formula, just for the sake of manipulating calories, which is a no-no. And then when you look at the BMI, because we have some abnormalities in the height, it really can skew what that BMI looks like, as well as to reassure you on this one that we've got a within normal range BMI, and they're still on Pediasure, and they're aging off of our program, and I don't know who's going to provide that Pediasure after we're not in the picture. So when we start focusing on how to boost those calories, not looking at the long term, and they're eating fewer and fewer solid foods, we are keeping the eye on the short term and not so much the long term. So we wanted to just look at what will be the risk of 113 changing from high to medium. Will this be an opportunity for our staff to look at healthy behaviors, or will there be missed opportunities where they might just say, mother or child's not concerned, but we don't explore what is going on in the feeding environment, what is happening, when do I have that conversation with the dietitian, and what additional training and tools do we need to help that conversation?
So how do we talk to participants about weight? And I'll try to get through these really quickly. I do want to mention the third one down is something I use fairly often. And just as a reminder that sometimes we just don't have this conversation. Some people don't want to explore it, and it's okay to respect where people are. But those parents or families that are worried about their child's growth anywhere on the spectrum, I've noticed when I just ask the question, how do you feel about their growth, that opens up all their fears, all of the underlying concerns that they have, just that question alone. And next slide. Also, ways to get this from us. And again, when wanting to explore this conversation further with those who want it, because if we're just giving people information on this topic that they have no interest in, that can just make things worse. But for those who are really wanting to explore it further, it can be a heavy topic, but these are some conversation pieces to have with them.
And this could also be conversations to have with staff as well.
Exactly. Yes. And then again, talking with staff to promote body satisfaction, kind of asking those questions that we brought up earlier about where our biases are we trusting our own bodies, where are we at, how do we feel about diet culture, what words are we actually using to describe babies and children. I did notice on that test that Cheryl was talking about taking that showed your biases, Some of the questions actually ask you, when you think of the word like cute or small, what kind of person are you picturing? So recognizing that sometimes the word small is synonymous with like being good looking, and sometimes we look at the word big and think gross or ugly, all of that stuff. So remembering some of those things.
So this will be, I know that we'll have more conversations in the next year of looking at supporting the parent-child attachment in the feeding relationships. This came to me from Charlie Slaughter of looking at, if we're focused just on getting kids to eat better, that agenda doesn't always work, that we need to determine where that attraction for the parent or the caregiver is to change and work with that. So do they want them to be smarter? Do they want them to be healthy? Do they want them to have good friends? That those connections of what they're wanting, those emotional connections, and then we need to trust that the change will result in a positive impact on the child's eating competence. That we want to move away from being food managers to relationship builders. So that when we're hearing like one more bite or you're not done, leaving the table, what we want to hear is, I want to hear about your day. I want you to be with me. I want you to help join me in the kitchen. I trust you will know when you're done. You're feeling adventurous by trying that food. So kids do need to be challenged, and that is the role of the parents, to be able to challenge and bring new exposures to those foods. And it's like, I hear how much you want X, and these are the choices that I can provide you. This is one that we bring many things to the table: love, care, connection, and food. And of all of those, food is important, but your love, care, and connection are far more important than the food.
So some counseling scenarios. A lot of these are common scenarios that we have to navigate with our clients, but I challenge you to look at the underlying concern. So for these two examples, it is that a bigger infant is a better infant, that they're worried, like, what is the child actually eating? And then also to recognize, is this a weight management perspective versus food relationship, and which one of those would help facilitate change or be more positive to focus on. Next slide. And then another counseling moment, this seems to be something that we see a lot, I think, as certifiers and dietitians. When children go from infancy to toddlerhood to exploring a lot of autonomy, that their preferences for foods changes. They go through extreme food jags and all that stuff. Again, the underlying concern is that they're just a picky eater. So we don't necessarily focus on the weight in these situations, but we want to explore their food relationship, their hunger fullness cues, etc.
And to really deconstruct, what does a picky eater mean for that mom or that parent, and to help unpack what does that mean in the meaning behind that statement.
Yes, absolutely. And then this one, I've seen a lot. Parents get fed up. They hear from everyone, including the media, and a lot of times people are trying to do no harm when they say these things, especially children, that they feel like they're just not getting enough to eat. Again, what does it look like? How do we unpack what that looks like for the parents? Did they experience food insecurity sometime in their life? Is that why they have some fear around this? That there's always a bigger picture to the underlying concern. Next slide. And then some phrases to keep this conversation flowing. Cheryl, I'm not sure if we need to or want to go through all of this. But I really liked this slide. What reflective practices work for you? So how are my cultural perceptions of beauty and health showing up? What cultural beliefs might others have that are different than mine about weight and health? And recognizing that weight can actually be a protective factor for some cultures and also viewed as a detriment for others. And then I think it's really important to note how I might be overwhelming my patient, that as healthcare providers, we love to give information even before clients are ready to receive it, but that can increase their ambivalence or drive them in the opposite direction.
I think we really want to empower that if they are at the place where giving potato chips is nourishing their child or what they perceive, meet them where they're at and explore what is that like and be able to understand what that brings to the feeding relationship and how are other ways that we can provide nourishment that may not be food related, and just being able to have that conversation. So with Julie's grant of looking at developmental milestones and to look at that parent-child interaction more, we want to have continue the conversation of what is relationship counseling look like, is that's really what we're trying to reframe the conversation. And that we will look deeper in the continuing meetings of what kind of unpacking that, and when it gets to be feeding concerns and kind of the clinical parts where they get so picky, they're so selective that we really are concerned about it. So we'll have more conversations about that as well. I wanted to share some resources that we are finding from a lot of different disciplines. And Vicki Baker took the course by helping your child with extreme picky eating up there by Dr. Rael, and she highly recommended it as a continuing ed opportunity. But know that there are a lot of diverse voices supporting the feeding relationship. Jamila wanted to put in the plug that if we expand our social media feeds, we get exposed to more voices and more perspectives from lived experience of people doing this work. And here's some resources that provided, some that came up from mine, and I'll send them out with the minutes as well. And then these are some from Meghan that I thought were really interesting. Any that you want to highlight, Meghan?
I really wanted to bring up the second from the last, the social determinants of health. There is a pie graph on there that I think is great to look at, especially because it was from the Center of Disease Control, and we're always looking for that evidence base.
So I know that was probably, as Meghan said, this is a whole week of training that we tried to cram into less than an hour and 45 minutes. So I appreciate that, and we will continue this discussion, and I hope that you'll continue the discussion with your staff and send us all comments all across this continuum, wherever you're at. If you challenge us, whatever you think we need to hear, please can just continue the discussion, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.